Hello, my name is Jonathan Soleimani, and today I would like to be telling you a history lesson uh, with an abolitionist named John Brown. And this is a lesson in solidarity and social movements, and let's get started. So, social movements have a deep rooted history in the United States. Movements like uh, the Civil Rights Movement and modern movements like Black Lives Matter and No Kings are something that we teach today as examples of movements in which there is solid change to society that we would like to see. There is a resistance to economic, political, social beliefs, right? So we're in these examples taking a stand up against racism and structural inequality that we see within society. And social movements are when people decide to come together and try to make that change through a movement of typically nonviolent that we teach to people. And that's the way that we believe that we should be teaching it to people. But there are oftentimes movements that, to get things done, or do not follow this traditional model of nonviolent protest. And that's not to encourage violence at all, but it's important to understand that our history has also included social change brought about by less peaceful means. So, what is abolitionism? Abolitionism is the moral argument at the time that there used to be slavery in the United States, and so uh, the belief was that there was this wrong, this evil that needed to be purged out of her. And it was correct, obviously, but at the time it was not the popular position. If you were an abolitionist, you were seen as a radical, you were seen as crazy and outside the establishment. So John Brown was a prominent abolitionist born in Connecticut to a very deeply religious anti-slavery family. And he believed that slavery was a moral issue that it was violent by design, and that it was not just labor exploitation, but a systematic torture and terror used against these people. There was violence being used against these people, and the law was protecting the violence of the systems of slavery, right? So the moral argument is that our laws were violent and therefore needed to be fought against. Now, what he did is during the Civil War, he leads this raid on Harper's Ferry with about 21 people, and it was a Confederate weapons arsenal, right? And it was put down by a Confederate general. And it was, unfortunately, he was tried for treason and given the death penalty. And this intensified his this idea that it's if one man and his work, he could do all this, that he was showing solidarity for the people, then he could make this great change and highlight the injustice. Now, I'd like to emphasize that in history books, they'll sometimes briefly cover him, and they won't emphasize his work that he did with abolition leaders. They typically say that he was just alone and crazy, unorganized, or an extremist. But what he was fighting against was violence. And so he's meeting that violence with a movement that could be seen as justified for the means that it was fighting back against. So oftentimes when you deem a social movement as violent, you have to understand, was there violence being done to them and it was, yes, he was fighting against slavery. So what is solidarity? Solidarity, we often hear like what we have is allyship, where we just like we support the cause, but there's not really much that's really done about it. But what John Brown did can be seen as solidarity in the way that he made sacrifices in order to stand for this cause. They killed him because he stood up to the institutions of slavery. And so the question becomes, when in the course of human events is nonviolent protest not enough? And I would like to believe that there's a lot to be learned about him in the ways that we view social movements today. Thank you for listening to this mini lecture, and I hope you have a wonderful day.